And we're live. Hey, everybody. GDP here in the Snooth Studios. I'm joined today by Roger Kugler. Thank you for coming, Roger.
Thank you for having us.
Great to have you here. We're here to talk about Ribera del Duero. Old vines, great wines, a fascinating place. Before we get started, Roger, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself so we know where everything's coming from?
I grew up in Missouri, where I still live. I run a farm there. My family's been there for over 100 years. I got into wine when I was living here in New York City, and restaurant work was my day job. Fell into it, loved it, got my sommelier certificate, ended up in a Spanish restaurant, fell in love with Spanish wine. When I left the restaurant industry, the Drink Ribera campaign was starting. I signed on board, and that's where I've been ever since. I've also done a lot with sherry. I actually won the top sommelier at the 3rd International Copa de Jerez in 2009.
Which is a huge honor.
So, it was a lot of fun, too.
I can imagine so. That's definitely one good thing about this business is we tend to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, wine is a love job.
It is indeed. Yes. You better get your satisfaction there because you're not getting anyplace else. So, a little bit of a primer for people just to let people know where we're coming from, what we're talking about. We're talking about the Ribera del Duero, which is in the center of northern Spain, really.
It's directly north of Madrid, about halfway between Madrid and the North Atlantic, just straight north, straight up the highway. It's an average range of about 71, I hear it described everything from 71 to 90 miles long and about 22 miles wide. We're just under 3,000 feet above sea level, which is really, really high. It's one of the highest elevations for red wine production in the world and certainly in Europe. Consequently, you have a very, very harsh climate. Our current motto is no place for the timid. And making wine here, we're talking about a love job. Making wine here is a love job. You have a climate that the locals describe as 9 months of winter and 3 months of hell. Winters will hit 5 degrees below zero and stay there with deep snows. Summers, that really, really short, intense summer, will hit 105 degrees during the day, drop to 70 degrees at night, go back up the next day. There's heavy winds, there's hail, there's everything you could think of. If you notice the vineyards, we'll talk a little about the topography later on in the presentation. There is no grass allowed to grow between the vines here because every bit of energy has to go into those vines. So that whole growing season is nothing but work, 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 work. And it's a phenomenal place to make wine. Because of that amount of work, you don't get bad wines here. And I know that sounds like PR mumbo jumbo, but it's really true. You have to work so hard to make wine.
It totally does sound like PR mumbo jumbo. And it may have not been true 10 or 12 years ago, but today, I mean, you would have to really search for poorly made wine.
Yeah. It's so hard. You have to make good wine here. There are places where you can stick the vine in the ground, go to Madrid, live for 11 months of the year, come back and make your wine, take a vacation. You can't do that in Ribera. You are on this year-round.
So, and today there are about 300 wineries in the DO.
Under 300.
Little under 300. So that's a tremendous amount of growth in the region from 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
From the 1970s, there were average about 15 wineries that were producing and making money. It was because of Alejandro Fernandez. When he made his money in the engineering, as an engineer making machinery for the beet industry, then he wanted to make wine. Everybody said, you're crazy, just forget it, whatever. He started making wine using an old 16th century wine press that they had on the property. Parker discovered him about 10 years later, and now we're up to just under 300 wineries. It is considered one of the great wine regions of the world, and of course, Vega Sicilia is one of the best wineries in the world and is located within Ribera del Duero.
Absolutely. It's a beacon of quality,
yes.
And I think that also sort of helps to drag everybody up. People must taste those wines and say, this is what is possible. It's a very aspirational thing, I would imagine, to have them as a neighbor.
Well, Vega Sicilia, most Spaniards like to be buried with a bottle of Unico in one arm and Valbuena in the other.
As long as they're empty and I've drunk them before I've died, I'm perfectly supporting. You're taking Magnums?
Magnums, yes.
Magnums, 68 under one arm, 70 on the other.
So it's harder to dig me up and take them later. There we go.
So